He sat in the old mess hall light coffee cooling beside the throttle lever that once answered his touch. They'd scoffed, said slowing down was fear, said the new jets didn't need patience or prayer. He only smiled, pressed a worn canteen cup to the table, its dent catching sunlight like a medal no one pinned. Quiet men leave echoes too, let me take you back. The hangar doors were rolled open just enough for the morning sun to cut across the floor like a bright stripe of paint. Dust motes drifted in the beam, turning every breath into light. 5 pilots lingered inside uniforms, half-zipped coffee cups balanced on toolboxes. They weren't fighting a war anymore. They were waiting for the airshow rehearsal. Ray Holden, the oldest of them, moved slower than the rest. His knees clicked when he walked. A thin white scar traced his temple where a headset once rubbed raw. He ran his hand along the throttle of an old training jet parked near the door, the metal cold under a film of dust. He eased it back a notch. Somewhere deep in the fuselage a relay clicked and the ghost of an engine hummed before falling silent again. "Careful, sir," one of the younger flyers called out. "You'd stall a drone doing that." The others laughed, a loose, harmless laughter that still cut deeper than they meant. Ray smiled with them, but his hand stayed on the lever. The sound of the prop fan above swelled and faded. The hangar smelled of coffee and old oil. Someone's thermos hissed as it was sealed shut. A voice over the PA called for the next briefing words, echoing into corners where swallows nested above the rafters. Ray watched the younger men gather their flight tablets and phones, bright screens flashing blue against the aluminum walls. They had grown up with simulations' radar overlays, digital warnings that sang before danger even arrived. He came from another era when silence was the first sign something was wrong. One of the boys, Miles Trent, turned back. "You really flew those, huh?" he asked, nodding toward the retired jet. "Long time ago," Ray said. "They were slower. Made you think." Miles grinned. "Guess we think faster now." Ray looked past him to the open door to where a breeze stirred dust across the threshold. Maybe, but sometimes the sky doesn't hurry with you. For a moment neither spoke. The fan overhead slowed. Its shadow spun across the deck in widening circles. The others filed out, voices fading toward the ready room. Ray stayed behind. The quiet settled heavy and warm. He traced the throttle's curve again, feeling the tiny scratches worn by 1,000 takeoffs and landings. That lever had been someone's lifeline, once a bridge between calm and chaos. Now it was just metal, a memory that fit neatly under his palm. He thought of the new engines outside, their blades slicing clean through the air, their pilots younger every year. They chased numbers, speed, altitude, reaction time. He'd chased silence, the moment when the plane and pilot agreed to trust each other. He exhaled slowly, the breath almost a prayer. The morning sunlight reached the far wall, touching a faded photograph taped near the tool rack, his old squadron lined up beside a plane painted silver and blue. All of them smiling, most of them gone. He took one step back from the throttle, listening to the empty space fill with the hum of the building itself, the rattle of metal, the echo of a far-off announcement, the faint pulse of the base waking up. "The only combat left," he murmured, "is the noise between generations." Outside, a jet roared down the runway and lifted into the bright air, its sound rolling through the hangar like thunder trapped in a bottle. Ray stood still until it faded. He could feel the engines fade inside him too. The PX window rattled softly whenever a jet passed overhead. Morning light spilled through the glass and caught the steam rising from 2 mugs on the table, the smell of burnt coffee mixed with jet fuel from the airstrip beyond the fence. Ray Holden sat opposite Janet Parker, a retired mechanic who'd worked on more engines than anyone still breathing. She was half his age but carried the same posture, straight spine, hands never still. Between them lay a stack of air charts, edges yellowed, corners curled like feathers. She tapped one with a pencil. "You ever think about flying again?" Ray smiled faintly. "These days I'm just happy remembering how." "You still come here every week," she said. "That counts for something." He shrugged. "Habit's a strong thing." On the table the coffee cooled to a dark mirror. Outside, gulls wheeled over the hangars. Somewhere down the hall the PX bell rang twice, and a pair of younger pilots laughed about their rehearsal schedule. The world had grown louder, Ray thought, and somehow thinner. He reached across the charts and pointed to a route drawn in faded ink. "We used to fly this coast run low and slow radar, barely picking us up." Janet smiled. Now they track a coffee break from space. Ray's laugh came out like a cough. He leaned back studying the window. You notice how quiet it gets when you stop talking? I notice how rare it is, she replied. A portable radio on the counter crackled the weatherman's voice, drifting in from somewhere far away. High pressure over the bay, visibility 10 miles, winds light and variable, the hum of normal life wrapped around words that once meant survival. Ray rubbed a spot on his sleeve where his old squadron patch had been sewn. Only the thread marks remained. They ran a piece in the Post last week, he said. Called us obsolete assets. Said drones do the thinking now. Janet's eyebrows lifted. Obsolete. That's a fancy way to say forgotten. Maybe that's the new front line, Ray said quietly. Staying remembered. She tilted her head. You read the part about the new training program they're hiring civvies as instructors. Thought about applying. He smiled into his cup. Would they even want me? They'll want someone who knows what heat feels like. He looked up at her, puzzled. She grinned. You know, the kind you can't cool off with air conditioning. He chuckled. These days the missiles just look like headlines. Janet laughed softly, eyes bright. They still lock on heat, anyone raising their voice. For a moment the noise of the PX faded. They sat in the hum of the vending machines, two old aircrew orbiting the same silence. Ray reached for one of the charts, smoothed it flat. I could teach a few of the basics again. Remind them why throttle's more than a switch. That's the spirit, Janet said. You'll drive 'em crazy. Not drive, he said. Guide. Her smile stayed patient and kind. You always were the quiet one. He nodded, tracing the thin blue line along the coast. Quiet doesn't mean done. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Then draw it again. Make it real. He uncapped a pen, paused, and began to circle the old route on the map, slow, deliberate, the ink spreading in a steady orbit. The radio shifted to music, a scratchy tune from another decade. The PX bell rang once more. Outside, the hangar bells answered deep and distant. Ray's hands rested around his cup, the warmth seeping into his fingers. He looked at the circle he'd drawn, closed, complete. Guess I'll need a call sign again, he murmured. Janet lifted her mug in salute. To the slowest pilot still flying, he smiled. Slow's just another word for careful. The steam between them thinned the world beyond the window, hazy with light and memory. He drew one last circle on the map, slow as orbit. The simulator bay smelled of burnt circuits and cold coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing the gray walls in a color somewhere between chrome and fatigue. Rows of screens glowed faint blue, each one ready to hold a sky that wasn't real. Miles Trent was already strapped in, tapping his foot against the rudder pedal, impatience drumming through the floor. Ray Holden stood behind him with a clipboard that hadn't been written on in years. Power's up, Miles said. You sure this antique still runs? Runs fine, Ray answered. You're the one that has to. The younger man grinned beneath his headset. Watch and learn, Grandpa. Ray leaned closer to the console. Try breathing first, then fly. The canopy screen filled with coastline clouds forming in quick digital layers. Miles pushed the throttle forward hard. The simulated jet leapt from the virtual runway. Alarms chirped once, then again, warning lights chasing each other across the panel. Altitude Ray said evenly, Ease off. You're redlining already. I've got it, Miles muttered. His hands tightened. The image outside wavered. Turbulence from the speakers thumped through the floor. He banked left too fast. A siren wailed. Throttle down, Ray called. Can't. The warning tone became one long, piercing note. The horizon on screen flipped blue to brown, and the simulated jet slammed into the digital earth with a hollow thud. Everything went black. Ray reached past him and flicked the main switch. The hum of the projector died. Only the fluorescent buzz remained. Miles yanked off the headset. Controls lagged. That's not on me. Ray folded the clipboard under one arm. Lag's another word for rushing. Miles stood the chair wheels squeaking. You can't teach instincts. Either you have it or you don't. Ray looked at him, calm as still air before takeoff. You think instinct's faster than patience? The younger pilot stared back, breathing hard. Outside the simulator room, someone's laughter echoed down the hall. Ray waited until the sound faded. He walked to the control rack, pressed a button, and the screens blinked back to life. Empty sky horizon waiting. "Sit," he said. Miles hesitated, then dropped into the seat again. Ray clipped a small patch to the side of the console, his old squadron emblem edges frayed, colors sun-bleached. "See that?" Ray said. "Every pilot earned one only after failing twice. The third time they learned to slow down." Miles studied it, not speaking. "Take her up again," Ray said. "Same course." Miles sighed but reached for the joystick. The simulated runway glowed ahead. This time his hand moved slower, fingers measured. The virtual engine rose in a steady hum. "Better," Ray said quietly. "Now breathe." Miles adjusted trim, steadied the climb. For a few seconds, the two of them listened to the soft whoosh of wind from the speakers. The simulator room seemed to stretch wider, filled with blue light and the rhythm of learning. Ray glanced at the patch, then at the trainee. "You don't fight the sky," he said. "You listen till it tells you where to go." Miles didn't answer. He was focused, jaw unclenched, eyes calm. The plane held its line across the false horizon. Ray exhaled slowly. The heartbeat in his ears faded with the simulator's hum. Outside the base, PA announced lunch over a crackling speaker. No one moved. Only the low whir of the projector and the faint sound of breathing filled the room. Ray rested a hand on the console, nodding once. He would show him what slowing really meant. The last light of day hung low over the airfield, flattening everything in gold. The wind had dropped to a whisper. Beyond the chain fence, a handful of families waited for the Memorial Weekend rehearsal kids, holding paper flags, faces turned upward. Inside the cockpit, Miles Trent flexed his hands on the controls. Sweat slicked the edge of his gloves. "Tower, this is Delta 3 ready for climb test." Ray's voice came through the headset, calm and measured. "Copy that, Delta 3. Keep her under 90. You're just stretching the wings, not chasing records." "Roger that." The engine wound up with a smooth roar. The trainer leapt from the runway and lifted into open sky. From the control trailer, Ray watched its tiny silver body climb against the evening light. He could hear the turbines through the headset, could feel them in his chest. At 600 feet, a sharp tone cut through the radio. Beep, beep, beep. Miles frowned. Heat warning. Temperatures climbing fast. "Ease the throttle," Ray said. "Still rising 40 degrees over nominal, throttle down, son." "Ease her out of the heat." The voice in his ear was low, but carried weight, the kind that steadied a heartbeat. Miles hesitated, then pulled the lever back. The engine pitch softened. The alarm chirp slowed, then stopped. The jet slid into a level glide. Below him, the wheat fields shimmered like sheets of brass. The light rippled across his canopy, turning every surface molten. For an instant, he imagined the heat itself searching for him. Anger, pride, the invisible missiles that always find men moving too fast. "Hold your course," Ray said. "Let the heat seekers stay blind tonight." Miles exhaled. The world grew quiet except for wind brushing the wings. He banked once, graceful and slow, then brought the plane down in a long, gentle arc toward the runway. From the ground, the crowd only saw a smooth landing, nothing dramatic, nothing to cheer for. But Ray felt the air shift, the weight lift. Discipline had done what bravado never could. The trainer rolled to a stop. The canopy popped open with a hiss of warm air. Ray was waiting by the wing ladder headset still around his neck. Miles climbed down, helmet under one arm, expression unreadable. Ray reached into his pocket and drew out a small brass coin, edges worn smooth by years of carrying. The emblem of their old squadron glinted in the dying sun. He pressed it into Miles's glove. "Keep this," he said. "You earned it the moment you slowed down." Miles looked at the coin thumb tracing the grooves. He nodded once. "Guess I finally outsmarted the heat." Ray smiled. "That's the idea." The wind stirred through the grass, cool at last. Overhead, the first evening star blinked through the haze. The heat finally missed its target. The hangar looked different when filled with people. Flags hung from the rafters, their shadows rippling over folding chairs. The scent of metal had been replaced by flowers and paper programs. Someone strummed a guitar softly near the podium cords, floating like warm air. Ray Holden stood near the back uniform jacket, pressed and borrowed clean for the day. Janet waved him forward, but he shook his head. He'd rather watch than be watched. Beside her, Miles adjusted the microphone, cheeks flushed under the lights. Janet began the reading, her voice steady and sure. For those who slowed down, she said, so others could come home. The words filled the hangar like the hum of a familiar engine. The air carried a kind of hush that only respect could make. Even the children at the back grew quiet. Ray lowered his gaze to the plaque resting on its stand, a square of brushed bronze edges catching the glow. Names filled every line, but the inscription below stood out like polished glass. In memory of those who throttled back when others rushed ahead. Applause began in small waves, then rolled outward beneath the hanging flags. A gust through the open door caught the fabric, sending red and white stripes rippling across the ceiling. Miles stepped to the mic. "I didn't get what that meant at first," he said, slowing down. "Thought it was just an old man's excuse for lost speed." Laughter rippled lightly. He looked down, smiling. "Turns out slowing down's harder. It means knowing the sky's bigger than you. Means letting others fly through safe." He gestured toward Ray and the crowd. The spotlight caught them both, mentor and student, standing in the same pale light that used to pour through cockpit glass. Ray felt the weight of the moment settle gently, not heavy, but true. Around him, heads turned, faces softened. It wasn't pride that rose in his chest, it was recognition, quiet and collective. Janet handed Miles the small plaque. He raised it slightly, not high enough for spectacle, just enough to honor what it stood for. The guitarist struck a slow chord, the tune carrying into the rafters where pigeons fluttered. The bass chaplain murmured a closing line about patience, about peace earned rather than fought for. The crowd responded with silence, first, then another long round of applause that rolled beneath the flag's moving shadow. Ray looked away, smiling. He thought of the field, the throttle, the coin. He thought of noise and quiet and how both could carry courage. The hangar lights dimmed as evening slipped through the high windows. The last note from the guitar lingered, fading into the hum of the air units. The crowd clapped where engines once roared. The hangar was empty again. The folding chairs stacked, the flag rolled back to its pole, the scent of coffee and rain drifting through the open side doors. Only the hum of the distant air unit filled the silence, a low, steady engine that never quite stopped. Ray Holden walked down the center aisle where sunlight striped the concrete. He carried the challenge coin in one hand, its edges warm from his palm. The throttle lever, the same one from the first lesson, sat mounted on a small display board near the wall labeled Training Console 1968. He brushed dust from the metal, then placed the coin beside it in the glass case. The coin caught the sunrise, and the light jumped across the hangar, gold spilling through every rivet line and tool shadow. For a moment it looked as if the sky itself had come to rest inside the case. Behind him, the hangar door creaked open. Miles stood in the doorway, still in his flight jacket, two children beside him holding small paper planes. "You're up early," Miles said. "Couldn't sleep." The kids pressed their hands to the glass, eyes wide. "That's the coin, right?" one asked. Ray nodded. "That's the one." "What's it for?" Miles looked down at them, then toward the display. "It's what you get for slowing down," he said. "For listening before moving." The older child tilted his head. "But isn't fast better?" Ray smiled faintly. "Fast wins races," he said. "Slow brings you home." Outside, a cargo plane rolled across the far runway, its engines rising in a smooth, distant growl. The sound filled the hangar without breaking the quiet. It was the same note Ray had heard his whole life, only softer now. He stepped back, studying the reflection of the coin and the throttle side by side. One gleamed, one dulled, but together they looked like they belonged to the same story. "Will they keep it here?" Miles asked. "Yeah," Ray said. "Let it sit where the light can find it." They stood for a while without talking. The children traced patterns on the glass, watching how their fingers turned gold when the sun caught them. Miles slipped his hands into his pockets, eyes on the coin. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think control meant pushing harder." Ray's voice was soft. "Most do. Then life teaches you the throttle works both ways." The morning breeze moved through the hangar, stirring the flag near the door. Dust lifted, drifted, then settled again like memory. Miles turned to go, ushering the kids ahead. "See you tomorrow, sir." "Just Ray," he said. When they left, he stayed a moment longer listening. The engine hum carried through the open door, faint and even. The sun kept climbing. He slowed down and the world followed. The silence landed clean,